Everyone. Welcome. Again, my name's Arlene Schiff. I'm a nurse. I'm an education specialist with Elderwerks. Have been in the healthcare field really my entire career and working with seniors and their families and guiding them through this journey of aging for over 20. Today, we will be exploring how psychology and lifestyle and perspective really influence the way we age and the quality of life that we experience. Aging is not just about years, it's about how we live those years. So let's begin here. I love starting with this quote because it just reminds us that humor helps us keep perspective. As you grow older, three things happen. The first is your memory goes, and I just can't remember the other two. So again, aging brings changes, but it also brings opportunities for joy and growth. So let's take a look at what our goals are for today. What is successful aging? Understanding the physical and psychological changes in aging. We'll review Erickson's theory of late life development, what quality of life means for different people, attitude and gratitude, how it can keep you young at heart, some lifestyle strategies for brain health, and applying positive psychology and gratitude to aging. So let's start with busting some myths. While society often paints aging really negatively, research shows that older adults can be happier and more resilient and really more satisfied with life. So what is successful aging? Way back in 1999, John Rowe and Robert Kahn developed one of the first formal models of what they called successful aging. And they wrote a book and they argued that aging well isn't just about living longer, it's about living well. And the model has four main elements. It's avoiding disease and disability. While we can't really prevent every illness, good health care and healthy habits can definitely reduce risks of disease. Maintaining function, meaning staying physically active, mentally engaged, emotionally balanced, then being actively engaged in life, staying socially connected. We've learned that through all that we've been through, especially with COVID, staying socially connected, involved with family, friends, or community. And then psychological well-being. They added the importance of resilience and emotional adaptation in later life. And the model shifted the conversation away from, decline toward what we can do to age successfully. And then more recently, there were researchers at the Stein Institute for Research on Aging at University of California in San Diego. This was led by a doctor, Dr. Jest, and he expanded the idea of successful aging in what they called the 7 tenets of successful aging. And this emphasized not only health and function, but the importance of psychological and social well-being. Physical, mental, and cognitive health, social engagement, meaningful activity and productivity, meaning having a purpose, whether it's work or hobbies or volunteering, and life satisfaction, how content we feel with our lives, resilience and spirituality, the ability to bounce back from challenges, and in many cases, finding comfort or strength in faith or a spiritual outlook. And together, these 7 tenets really offer a more holistic picture, showing that successful aging is about the whole person, not just about absence of disease, but again, looking at the whole person. So we really learn a lot from the people who came before us. A role model in aging might be someone who stays engaged, maintains humor, adapts with grace through challenges. So, pause for a moment here and think who in your life inspires you as they age and what qualities really stand out. Now reflect on that and how you can then become a role model for younger generations, your friends, your neighbors, your family members, or even your peers. So, are we all successful at aging? This is really an important reflection. It's success isn't in aging isn't one size fits all. Some could define it as staying healthy and active. Others say it's maintaining independence. Many people say it's about having a purpose, staying connected, adapting even in the face of health challenges. So, ask yourself, what does successful aging mean for me? And I'd love if you shared some of your thoughts and your and comments in the chat section, especially when you think about what does successful aging mean for you. Love to have you all share that with each other. So let's take a look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We always hear about this. It reminds us that we all have basic needs, from physical safety to emotional connection, and finally to purpose and meaning. And later in life, sometimes these needs may shift. For example, health and safety could take on greater importance. Belonging, meaning feeling valued and connected and included. It's really important as we age. And at the top, that self-actualization, continuing to learn and grow and finding purpose, that's no matter what age we are. And this shows us that the quality of life isn't just about medical care, it's about meeting those social, emotional, and personal needs. So again, once again, please share your thoughts. Which of these feels most important to you at the present moment? Now let's take a look at Erik Erickson. He was a developmental psychologist who believed that our lives unfold in stages, and at each stage, we face a central challenge. So for older adults, the stage is called integrity versus despair. Integrity comes when we sit back and look over our lives with a sense of satisfaction, feeling that our life had purpose and meaning and value. And we may not have done everything perfectly, but we can at this point accept our choices and find peace. And now despair, on the other hand, arises when we dwell on regrets and feel bitterness, and about missed opportunities. The goal of this stage is really to move towards wisdom, which he described as the ability to face the end of life with a sense of completeness and calm. But it's really important to remember that it isn't all or nothing. And many people experience both integrity and despair in different areas of our life. Someone might feel proud of their career, but regret some lost relationships. So what helps tip the balance towards integrity? It's supportive relationships and connections with others, opportunities to share stories, share the wisdom that you've gained, share your life lessons. It's a sense of ongoing contribution, and whether it's volunteering or mentoring or just being present for our loved ones, it's important to practice gratitude and focus on meaning rather than regrets. So in this stage, aging well is less about avoiding illness, but more about finding meaning and acceptance and peace in our life journey. So aging affects, our bodies and our minds. And the two are really very much connected, and probably more than we realize. Biological factors play a role. Our brains and bodies undergo physical changes. Behaviors can modify your brain. It's very important, exercise and diet and sleep, and we'll go through that a little bit later. But they do share a connection, which really means what happens physically in our brain can affect our mood and our thinking and our memory. But the reverse is also true. Keeping mentally and socially active can positively influence our brain biology. And we know that research has shown that aging brains change differently from younger brains. Older adults can really recruit different areas of the brain to maintain function. And that's why people can remain sharp well into their 80s and 90s and even hundreds. Cognitive reserve builds resilience. So over a lifetime, learning and education and hobbies, they build a sort of like a backup system that can buffer against memory problems or decline. But really, it takes you as an individual. The science is very clear that lifestyle and attitude and engagement matter, and making healthy choices can really help actively shape your own psychology of aging. So let's take a look now. What is normal aging? The brain controls many aspects of thinking, our memory, planning, organizing, making decisions, and so much more. And these cognitive abilities really affect how well we do everyday tasks and whether we can live independently. Some changes in thinking are very common as we get older. You may have increased difficulty finding words or recalling names. That happens to me on a daily basis. More problems with multitasking, or decreases in the ability to pay attention. But aging may also bring cognitive changes. People often find that they have more knowledge and insight from a lifetime of experience. And research shows that older adults can still learn new things, create new memories, improve our vocabulary and language skills. So just keep remembering that as we go through this today. As we age, we do know that the brain does go through some natural changes. Certain parts of the brain shrink slightly, especially those involved in memory and learning. There's communication between the neurons in our brain. They slow down and make processing just a little less quick. Blood flow to the brain can decrease, and sometimes there's some mild inflammation. These are very normal biological changes in aging, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have dementia or disease. They just help explain that why things like memory lapses or slower recall can happen as we get older. Just want to quickly show you what a normal brain on the left looks like. There's some mild cognitive impairment here, and then with Alzheimer's disease. So typically, normal aging is characterized by a general slowing of cognitive performance, meaning older adults typically perform worse than younger adults in tasks on attention and working memory, things like that. There is a decrease in mental flexibility, as we said, finding the right word. But older adults do retain their verbal abilities, including vocabulary, but it just may take a little bit longer to remember a name or a certain word. There can be a mild decrease in short-term memory, but recall of past events and long-term memory really remains intact. If have normal aging, you can remember things like our current president's name, or discuss recent or major current events. You might express, to a family physician that you're forgetting names or words, but that is normal. As we age, sometimes there's visual perception changes and sensory impairments. Sometimes it's our eyes change, our vision changes. It's more difficult to see and hear with the same clarity that we've had in our younger years. So very important to get those vision tests, get those hearing tests, because a decline is very common and normal in aging. Cataracts, glaucoma, you might need hearing aids, and that's okay. It keeps us to have the ability to maintain social relationships. Um, you might see, changes in visual perception. So again, very important to just make sure we're keeping up and checking on these things and seeing our physicians to maintain as much as we can to improve that, whether it's with glasses or hearing. Um, Take a look at this slide, cognitive changes, normal aging versus what could be dementia. Someone years ago said to me, it's one thing when you put your keys down next to your bedside table and you can't remember where they are. But if you can't remember where they are and you find them in the refrigerator, then you might have something to worry about. Or you're looking at your keys and you can't identify what they're for. That's when you start thinking that there might be something to be concerned about. But if you take a look at this, making a bad decision occasionally, that's okay. But if you are consistently having poor judgment, that is a concern. You miss a bill payment, that's one thing. But if you can't concentrate on your bills and your family comes in and opens your kitchen drawer and sees all your mail is unopened because you can't manage your budget anymore, that's concerning. Forgetting what day it is, every day seems like it's the weekend, that's okay. But if you're losing track of the date or the season historically, then that's more of a concern. If you're having difficulty with a conversation and following along in a conversation, that's something to be concerned about. Again, misplacing but unable to retrace, that's a little worrisome. Forgetting the food on the stove, that is concerning, but that's sometimes normal aging. But forgetting that the meal was prepared in general, that's something more concerning. So we take a look at the 6 pillars of brain health, and this was noted by the Cleveland Clinic. These pillars form really the foundation for brain health at any age, and it's physical exercise, socialization, mental fitness, medical health, health and diet, sleep and relaxation, and we'll be covering a bit of all of these as we go through. So many people assume that aging automatically means a steady decline in brain function, but research shows that that's not necessarily true. If we stay physically healthy, socially engaged, and mentally active, our brains can continue to function very well into later life. Studies show that lifelong learning, whether it's reading or taking classes or learning new skills, really can actually help protect the brain and even delay onset of conditions like Alzheimer's. It's an important reminder that decline is not inevitable. We do have the ability to strengthen and support our brains at any age. So again, a question for all of you: what was the last new skill or hobby that you tried, or something new that you'd like to learn? Maybe try even a new recipe or a new type of cooking. Let's talk about neuroplasticity. I just asked you to think of a time you might have, learned something new or that you never thought of learning earlier. That experience is really an example of what, excuse me, what neuroplasticity is. It's the brain's ability to rewire itself. It forms new pathways and connections even as we age. And, for a long time, scientists thought that the brain just stopped developing when we became adults. But now we know that the brain can continue to change and adapt throughout life. So there's something called neurogenesis. It's the ability of the brain to grow new neurons. And they're very active in certain areas. There's a place in the brain called the hippocampus, and that's the key for memory. So what does that mean? It means that our brains are not fixed. Learning new things and staying curious, keeping mentally active can literally change the brain's wiring and help protect our memory. So every time you take a class, you learn a new technology, try a new hobby, even meeting new people, you're exercising your brain and strengthening these connections. So have a little exercise for you to do. Right now, as you're sitting with me, cross your arms the way you normally do. Now, uncross them and try crossing them the opposite way. What happens? How did you feel? Kind of feels awkward, doesn't it? It kind of makes you laugh because I'm thinking, how do I reposition my hands? Felt a little uncomfortable. But with practice, it gets a little easier. And with that, that's neuroplasticity. People say, research says, even, if you're right-handed and you brush your teeth with your right hand, use your left hand. That's developing new synapses, new neurons, new connectivity in your brain. So let's talk a little bit more about mental fitness. And again, how do we exercise our brain? Learn to play a new musical instrument, play Scrabble, do those word puzzles. They help. Socialization. How many times have you heard me say it? I'll say it a few more. Staying informed about the world. Take current event classes. Continue joining us on these types of classes, or go to your local senior center. But stay informed. Volunteer. Have become a role model. And volunteer with younger kids even. So there's many opportunities to exercise your brain. So let's take a 2-minute test on how good your memory is. Start focusing. So how did you all do? Please type it in the chat how you did. And what did you find most difficult? I personally found most difficult identifying all the live things in the video. 7. Great, Betty, that's incredible. Some terrible. 6. Thanks for sharing that. It makes us all feel good. So let's talk about important foods and drinks for brain power. You can see here, fatty fish, berries, dark chocolate. We hear this all the time, and I hope you all are trying to do this, but it's very, very important, and studies have shown how important this is. The Mediterranean style diet has been linked with lower risk of dementia and better brain health. So all of these separate things have shown, 60% of the brain is fat, while half of the fat is omega-3. And fatty fish, which is rich in omega-3, builds brain and nerve cells that are really important for learning and memory. And research has shown that omega-3 can slow mental decline. Coffee has been proven to improve alertness. It improves mood release of serotonin, which is that feel-good neurotransmitter. Turmeric is the key ingredient in curry, and it's got a number of benefits. It's plant-based, it's an antioxidant, and it's an anti-inflammatory. Broccoli, powerful plant, lots of vitamin K. It's a fat-soluble vitamin, and it's packed with vitamin K is packed into brain cells to prevent inflammation, so that's why that's good. Pumpkin seeds, host of antioxidants. It has zinc, magnesium, iron, copper, which is crucial for nerve ending signaling. So very, very important things. Physical exercise, talk about it all the time. It's one of the most powerful tools we have to support healthy aging. It increases blood flow and oxygen to the brain. It helps keep our brain cells healthy. Exercise, releases those hormones that create a better environment for new brain cells to grow. It promotes that brain plasticity, stimulating those new connections between the neurons. And of course, it strengthens our body. It improves balance, which is so important. It boosts our mood. It increases energy. Even light activity, walking, gardening, just even stretching helps. And you want to aim really more for consistency rather than intensity. Movement every day really helps protect both the brain and the body. So again, throwing out to you, what is your favorite way to stay active? What do you guys do on a daily basis? Let's take a look at another brief video on your brain on exercise.
Exercise is good for your body and your brain. Here's what happens to your brain when you exercise. Your heart rate speeds up and your body starts to work hard. Your brain recognizes these responses as stressors and responds by releasing chemicals that protect you from stress. BDNF and endorphins. BDNF repairs and protects your memory neurons and clears your mind so you can make good decisions. Exercise also increases blood flow to the brain, improving brain cell activity and focus. Increased oxygen in the brain as a result of increased blood flow creates new cells in the parts of your brain that control learning and memory. Endorphins help reduce discomfort, block feelings of pain, and cause pleasure. These feelings can last for hours after you have finished exercising, which is why you feel happier, more relaxed, and less stressed after a workout. Regular exercise over a long period of time can help protect you from anxiety and depression, increase brain cell function, improve your memory, and may help prevent many diseases. Regular exercise may also improve your self-esteem as you feel more confident about your looks and what you can do. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends that adults get at least 150 minutes of exercise per week. Just 30 minutes a day of walking, moving around, or even dancing can build a stronger, healthier brain.
Important to exercise. So here's an interesting picture that you can see that Here's your brain sitting quietly, and then there's your brain after a 20-minute walk. There's more brain activity after that 20-minute walk. And it doesn't matter how fast you walk, but it's just stimulating the cells in your brain. So it's so important. So sleep is one of the most important and sometimes overlooked parts of healthy aging. A consistent sleep schedule is so important. And I know it's not easy. And, going to bed and waking up around the same time each day really helps regulate your body's internal clock. And it makes it easier to fall asleep and stay asleep. Um, Now, I know I'm guilty of this. I'm sure most of you are as well. Try to limit screens before beds. I am constantly waking up in the middle of the night, and the first thing I do is pick up my phone, and that's the worst thing that we can do. So do as I say, not as I do, as my parents used to say. Um, your phones, your tablets, even the TV screen, that gives off that blue light, and it tricks the brain to thinking it's daytime, and that can then make it harder to wind down and then fall back asleep. So it's important to create a calming bedtime routine. Read a book, listen to soft music, do some gentle stretching, even just a few minutes of deep breathing or meditation. And if you do those same relaxing activities each night, it gives a signal to your brain that it's time to rest. And good sleep, when your brain clears out the toxins, it's repairing itself, it consolidates memories. It's, think of it as your brain's nightly housekeeping, and without that sleep, memory and mood can suffer. So making sleep a priority really isn't just about feeling rested. It's really about protecting your brain as well as your overall health. Mindful meditation. I know a lot of people roll their eyes when we talk about meditation, but it's really effective. And mindful meditation really has powerful effects on the brain, and especially as we age. Studies have shown that it can actually change the brain's gray matter volume, especially in those areas that are linked to our memory, as well as emotional regulation. So, and it also reduces activity in the brain's me centers, the part that fuels worry and rumination. It increases connections between the brain regions, and it helps the brain work more efficiently. And the best part about mindful meditation is it can be done anywhere. And in just a few minutes of quiet breathing or focused awareness, it really frees the brain from anxiety and anger and toxic thoughts. We all know that when our minds wander too much, it is linked to lower happiness. So mindfulness helps us to stay present. And that routine, a good routine, is something to practice first thing in the morning, before checking your phone, and do that again at night before bed, way after you check your phone for the last time. But even 5 minutes can make a difference. And think of it as mental fitness. And it's a workout for the brain's calm and focus centers. And mindful meditation is good in the middle of the day too. If if you're worrying about your kids, or you've got aging parents, or whatever's going on in your life, do some mindful meditation. It is extremely helpful. And again, even if you don't know where to begin, just sit in a chair and take some deep breaths for 1 or 2 minutes, and you'll feel that calming sense come over you. Staying socially connected is as important for brain health as diet, sleep, and exercise. Regular interaction with friends and family and your community, it really helps your mind stay sharp and keep your mood positive. social ties really, reduce the risk of depression and loneliness and even dementia. We see the studies that came out and continue to come out from the effects of COVID and being socially isolated, and some of the deaths in senior living communities because of the isolation that was seen there are tied to that reduced social interaction. Social ties, if you have social ties, it reduces those risks of the depression and the loneliness and dementia. So activities like joining a club, volunteering, mentoring, meeting friends or family for coffee, that all provides meaningful connection. And once again, interaction is an exercise for the brain. So every conversation that you have, even if it's a shared laugh or new connection, this helps build resilience, and it really helps keep us engaged with life. So, you know, it, my encouragement is call or visit a friend or a family member regularly. Join a senior center or join a club or a community group, volunteer. Even if it's just a few hours a month, it helps. There's, intergenerational programs, reading to children or mentoring teens. The key here is start small. Even, one extra point of connection each week can really boost your mood, lower that stress, and again, support that brain health. So I'm going to give you 60 seconds here. I don't want to turn on this clock because it's kind of annoying, but I'm going to give you about 60 seconds and do a brief exercise with me. See how many words, whether it's two-letter words, 3, 4-letter words, and see how many you can find. Let's begin. We're halfway through. Keep going. So how'd you do? The number isn't necessarily important. It's the exercising of our brain. Did you find any 4-letter words like last or list or tail? Once you find one like tail, you go to nail or sail. But doing these types of exercises is really important. And again, it's exercising your brain. This kind of activity really strengthens that word finding and focus. So our phones have these apps of word finding exercises. You can buy books with word finding exercises. So I encourage you to do that. So let's take a look at positive aging. Aging isn't just about change and loss. It really also brings a lot of gifts. With age comes wisdom, perspective. And it's a perspective and wisdom that younger people really haven't experienced. And many older adults develop a deeper sense of gratitude and resilience. Having weathered challenges and learning to adapt, we're grateful for that. And we know that we can take on the next big challenge because we've been through enough. Relationships become even more meaningful. We focus on quality of those relationships, and it's a quality over quantity. Later life offers the freedom to focus on what truly matters, love and joy and purpose, instead of being caught up in all the busyness and the nonsense. We learn to say no. We learn to say, I don't care if people are talking about me behind my back. I can walk out the door without makeup and in my sweats because it makes me feel good. It offers a freedom to focus really on what truly matters. And I always go back to that love and joy and purpose. Positive aging is about embracing these strengths, choosing optimism, finding meaning in each stage of our life. So once again, take a moment to reflect. What's one thing in your life right now that brings you joy and gratitude or purpose? And please share. I'll begin. To me, at this moment in my life, it's my family. And that's what brings me joy, and that's what brings me gratitude. And that is my purpose in life. As much as I love my job and teaching and nursing, the biggest thing to me, again, that brings the joy, the gratitude, and purpose is my family. What about all of you? So again, positive aging isn't about denying challenges. It's about noticing and celebrating what gives our life meaning. Thanks for sharing. Let's see. I teach at the AARP Safe Driver class, and it brings me joy to help older drivers stay safer on the roads. Well, and we thank you for doing that. And I'm glad that that brings you joy. That's a beautiful thing. Thanks for sharing. So as we wrap up here, some of the main points I hope you'll take away with you today is that successful aging isn't defined by the absence of illness. It's about how engaged and purposeful and resilient we are. And aging does bring natural changes, but it also brings strengths. It brings wisdom and gratitude and perspective. And all of this grows deeper with time. Our daily choices, whether it's eating well, moving our bodies, sleeping soundly, staying connected, truly will make a difference for our brain as well as our body health. Most importantly, our attitude and gratitude. It shapes our experience. And focusing on meaning and connection and joy, we can all change in a positive and more fulfilling way. So I'll leave you with this thought from Eleanor Roosevelt. Beautiful young people are accidents of nature, but beautiful old people are works of art. To me, this really captures the essence of aging with grace, and the idea that later life can really reflect the wisdom, the resilience, and the beauty that we've built over these years of our lifetime. So I thank you for being with us today. I had to choose one quote, but there are so many. Maya Angelou has a quote: "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." And that's a perfect reminder that it's never too late to adapt and grow. So again, I appreciate you coming today. Hope to see you for future educational presentations. Please remember, Elderworks is here for you, for education, for working with our senior guidance advisors. We can help answer any questions that you may have for you, your loved ones, family members.